Working the late-night shift at a 24-hour big-box store, you see all kinds of characters pass through the checkout line. Exhausted parents stocking up on diapers, college kids grabbing energy drinks and ramen, and occasionally some people who just give you weird vibes for no particular reason. But nothing could have prepared me for the customer I had one ominous night last week. It started normally enough. A man who looked to be in his 40s shuffled up to my lane around 1 a.m. with a handful of mundane items. Bread, peanut butter, lunch meat, standard fare. He avoided eye contact and gave mostly one-word responses as I made small talk while scanning his few groceries. Nothing remarkable whatsoever. Until I grabbed the next item from his cart. A large glass bottle, about a liter, with an old-fashioned label reading chloroform. I froze momentarily, then let out a forced laugh trying to break the tension. Wow. Don't see this stuff being sold too often. What is it, for cleaning or something? I quipped uncomfortably. The man just stared at me blankly before muttering, yes, something like that. An uneasy silence hung in the air as I checked him out. I convinced myself maybe he just didn't pick up on my lame joke. But as I continued ringing up his items, my lightheartedness quickly drained away. Next was a package of zip ties, then black plastic sheeting, and a shovel. With each new object, a knot twisted tighter in my stomach. Individually, they could be innocently explained away. But together, this was starting to look like a murder kit. I struggled to keep my hands from shaking as I scanned the last few items. Clothwork gloves and a studded tire iron. I swallowed hard. Will this be all for you today? I somehow managed to ask with a courteous smile. That'll do it, he replied casually as he swiped his card. As I handed him the receipt, I clutched his forearm on impulse. Sir, I know this is weird, but is everything okay? Do you maybe want to talk? I immediately regretted this awkward intervention. The man slowly turned back and locked eyes with me for the first time. A wave of unease washed over me. Without a word, he gently but firmly removed my hand from his arm and walked out. I stood in stunned silence, unsure what to do next. Call the police over some circumstantial purchases. I didn't have any concrete proof of an actual crime. Maybe it was perfectly harmless. I decided my best option was just to make a report to the store manager. He could at least have security keep an eye out for the customer if he returned. I tried putting the creepy encounter out of my mind. A week went by without incident. But the following Monday night, I heard a familiar shuffling of feet enter my checkout lane around 1. My pulse spiked when I looked up to see the same man placing a new batch of items onto the conveyor belt. My eyes reflexively went wide at the sight of his cart before I could put on a neutral expression. Rope, duct tape, bleach, a hunting knife, trash bags, road flares. His intense eyes bore into me as I scanned each piece, burning holes in my forehead. I knew then this was no coincidence. I worked up the nerve to ask as politely as possible, stocking up for a big project. You could say that, he replied with a cryptic grin. It was nice chatting with you last week. You're more friendly than the other cashiers here. A cold chill ran down my spine at this unsettling statement. I forced a plastic smile in response, but my mind was racing. I needed to notify security immediately after this guy left. Something sinister was going on here, but I still lacked anything concrete to demonstrate criminal intent. The most I could do was report him as suspicious and give them my earnest gut feelings. Unfortunately, that likely wouldn't warrant much action on their end. Anxious weeks passed without any sign of the ominous customer. Then one quiet Tuesday, right as I was preparing to close up for the night, I heard those familiar shuffling footsteps approaching. A lump caught in my throat. I was alone up here tonight. It was just the two of us. I considered making a run for the store phone to call security, but before I could act, the man had already unloaded his items onto the belt. My heart dropped. A hunting rifle, ammunition, rags, a trench coat, ski mask, and a gasoline canister. He looked up into my eyes with a haunting grin. I believe this will be all for the evening, he said with unsettling pleasantness. You'll want to make sure this gets bagged up real nice and neat for me, won't you, dear? I was paralyzed, my hands dripping cold sweat as they clenched numbly around the rifle, scanning it. I knew I had to keep this monster here as long as I could, while making some kind of signal for help. Of course, sir, I will triple bag this for you, I replied overbrightly. As subtly as I could, I pressed the silent security alarm with my foot, while bagging the items at an exaggeratedly slow pace. Please let them get here fast. Say, I don't suppose you'd have any half-price candy bars at the register? The man suddenly asked. I've had such a hankering for something sweet lately. I forced a smile. You know, I think we might. Let me duck back here and take a quick look for you. This was my chance. As I pretended to rummage below, I quietly grabbed the phone instead and dialed the police, while glancing back to make sure the man couldn't see the glow of the buttons. My hands were quaking. After what felt like an eternity of hushed explaining, the operator assured me a patrol car was on its way. I just had to keep stalling. I crept back up to the counter with a few random candy bars. Looks like you're in luck. I found a few discounted ones in the back. I held my breath, praying the sirens would arrive before he grew tired of waiting. But instead, he just smiled calmly. Well now, aren't you just the sweetest thing, he said as he browsed the selection. I'll take 2 of these bad boys then. We then proceeded to make agonizing small talk about the weather, while I pretended to slowly organize his items with care. After 10 excruciating minutes, I finally heard sirens growing louder outside. 2 uniformed officers entered briskly through the automatic doors and made a beeline toward my lane. The man regarded them with an expression of mild annoyance as they approached. Sir, we received a report of some suspicious activity on your behalf tonight, said the older cop sternly. Would you mind stepping over here so we can ask you a few questions? The man leaves shrugged but otherwise remained eerily calm. Fine by me. Just a routine purchase, but happy to chat. The officers escorted him away from the checkout aisle to a corner of the store. I observed anxiously from afar, straining to hear their conversation. After several minutes of what appeared to be pointed questioning, they suddenly slapped cuffs around the man's wrists and let him out. I exhaled deeply in relief. Later, the officers took my full statement and thanked me profusely for the timely tip. The man had no existing criminal record, but his responses to police questions were suspicious enough to warrant a thorough search of his home. In his basement, detectives uncovered duct-tape trash bags leaking a red substance. The walls were soundproofed with foam panels and plastic sheeting, and distilled chemicals were being used to dissolve remains. They had caught him just before he could dispose of the latest victim's body after my call. I was praised as a hero by the community when the news went public, but I still shuddered imagining how close I'd come to being the next target. Needless to say, I promptly quit that job, fearful that the man or an accomplice might return. The police assured me I had nothing to worry about with him now behind bars, but paranoia gnawed at me for months until we moved out of state. I'll never know for certain what dark deeds he had planned that night before I intervened, but the possibilities that haunt me are worse than I care to imagine. After that traumatic encounter, I look at strangers differently now. I no longer take harmless normalcy for granted when interacting with those I don't know, because hiding behind anyone's friendly facade can exist the most twisted intentions. My naive trust has been shattered forever, thanks to one fateful overnight shift. I'm just grateful I was able to recognize the subtly sinister signs when I did, and summon the courage to set the wheels of justice in motion before it was too late. Though the man is long gone, he still lingers as a specter in my psyche. I often bolt awake, imagining his eerie grin as he bided his time in line that night, never suspecting that I would unravel his monstrous plot. The echoes of evil can run deeper than we fathom. As an overnight stalker at Walmart, you see all kinds of eccentric customers who come out late at night. Teenagers giggling over magazines, old men testing blood pressure cuffs for hours. People dance to tinny music and electronics, but nothing prepared me for the seemingly harmless older lady who frequented my shifts. She first came in around 2 a.m. on Tuesday, rolling a small beat-up cart containing only her oversized floppy purse. I noticed her aimlessly wandering the health and beauty section in a dingy house dress and slippers, gazing up at the towering shelves like she was in a museum. Weird, but nothing too crazy. But over the next few weeks, she started showing up more often, still just browsing endlessly each night. If asked, she'd vaguely claim to be looking for something, but never actually bought anything. My coworkers and I jokingly started calling her the Phantom Shopper. She seemed harmless, until one late Friday shift when she abruptly approached my stocking cart and grasped my arm with a bony claw. Her clouded eyes bored into mine with unsettling intensity. "You look so much like my Harold, but you aren't really him, are you?" She tightened her grip. "You need to go get my Harold." I stammered some polite reply about not knowing her husband Harold, while gently removing myself from her grasp. She continued staring and muttering distantly until I hurried off to finish restocking, badly creeped out. Despite the bizarre encounter, I still didn't think much of the addled woman's nightly visits, until the run-ins started getting stranger. She'd corner me while stocking, insisting Harold had sent her secret messages or was trying to poison her. Once she even asked me to come inspect noises in her attic for raccoons. I humored her ramblings politely, but her behavior had gone from odd to unsettling. I asked my manager if we could ban her from the store after hours, but he was reluctant without a more concrete reason. Meanwhile, the phantom shopper continued her lurking nightly visits, now fixated on me. She'd shamble along with my stocking cart, babbling about the conspiracies around her missing husband. My jokes about it being a boring old person's idea of fun had stopped being funny. Then one night, I passed by the hunting section and was paralyzed by what I saw. The phantom shopper staring back at me, smiling eerily, while holding a loaded crossbow straight at me. In that instant, her expression transformed from confusion to frightening clarity. "I finally figured it out," she uttered cryptically. "Don't worry, dear. This will only hurt for a second." My heart seized. By pure instinct, I dove behind a shelf, just as the arrow whizzed past, embedding in a display of decoys with a loud thunk. The woman seemed unfazed, calmly reloading like this was routine. Moving quickly, I sprinted down the aisles, trying to put distance between us. I could hear the clicking of her rickety cart giving chase. I came upon a wary late-night couple and frantically begged them to call the police while pulling them into the employee break room to hide. The woman wandered by minutes later, muttering chilling threats, crossbow ready for anyone emerging. An agonizing 20 minutes passed as we huddled silently, hearing her pace outside. Finally, flashing red and blue lights appeared at the front. Police entered stealthily, eventually tackling the deranged woman to the ground as she kicked and screamed about finally finding Harold. We cautiously emerged from the break room, the officers apologizing profusely for not responding sooner to my urgent calls about her. Apparently, the woman's senile mind had convinced her I was involved in her husband's disappearance nearly 30 years prior. In her fragmented mental state, she had decided it was up to her to dispense twisted justice. I was adamantly urged to take legal action for my own safety, but I declined. There seemed no point in punishing someone clearly not in touch with reality, but I did insist she be banned from the store. My managers also finally took me seriously, promising security upgrades and escorts to my car after closing, but the fear lingered. I kept imagining that wild gaze turning on me again somewhere outside those fluorescent-lit aisles. Despite reassurances that the woman was confined to a care facility, I remained jumpy, closing up alone at night. The pharmacy section still made my skin crawl. I found myself avoiding the crossbow display. Eventually, I put in for a transfer to the day shift, despite the pay cut. The final straw came when I spotted a lonely old lady wandering aimlessly down the shampoo aisle one afternoon. Not her, I reminded myself, but still the spitting image of the phantom shopper. Some nerve in me had been permanently unsettled by that bizarre encounter in the shadows of retail's graveyard shift. The innocence of senile old ladies had been forever tainted. I realized anyone could hide dark secrets and lost connections behind their benign facade. An ordinary, monotonous shift could instantly transform into a nightmare at the hands of someone you least suspect. The pharmacy aisle is still not somewhere I like to linger after dark these days, because you never know what memories or ghosts still lurk there, waiting to be unleashed by the shadows. It was 10:55 p.m., and I was nearing the end of another mundane closing shift at the local Walmart superstore where I worked. As a night stalker, my job was to restock the shelves after the store closed at 11. It was mindless work, but it allowed me to just put my head down and get through each long shift without having to deal with customers, and the overnight premium meant I was at least getting paid well for the boring labor. On this particular sticky July night, I was reorganizing a shelf of canned vegetables in the largely deserted store when I heard a loud crash come from a few aisles over. I froze, clutching a can of peas. Was I hearing things? Or had someone else snuck into the store before closing? My pulse began to quicken as I crept out from the aisle to investigate. All of the lights were still on bright, buzzing above me. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. "Hello?" I called out. "Store's closing in 5 minutes, just giving you a heads up." No response. I chalked it up to a large item falling over on its own. With the huge shelves towering above me on every side, it wasn't uncommon for packages that were poorly placed to topple occasionally. Still, something about it gave me the creeps. I decided to do one final sweep of each aisle before officially closing up. As I cautiously strolled past the women's clothing section, a flash of motion in my periphery suddenly made my heart skip a beat. I snapped my head just in time to see the tail end of a silhouette darting behind the long rack of dresses. The plastic hangers swayed slowly from the disturbance. I stood paralyzed for a moment, my palms clammy with cold sweat. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to steady my shaky voice. "The store's closed, you need to leave now." Again, no response. A tense, heavy silence fell over the entire store. I couldn't even hear the hum of the lights anymore over the pounding pulse in my ears. As I slowly crept toward the dresses, my nerves jangled at full alert. I knew someone was in here with me. But who? And why were they hiding instead of just leaving normally? I took a deep breath as I reached the rack where I'd seen movement. I clenched my fist tight around the sleeve of a floral dress, preparing to whip it aside. As I jerked back the garments, my heart dropped like a stone. There was no one there. I peered up and down the length of the aisle but saw nobody nearby. Had I just imagined it after all? No, I was certain someone had been over here just a second ago. I suddenly noticed that same flash of motion again, this time ducking behind a display of yoga pants. His shoes squeaked sharply against the polished floor as he darted out of sight. Now I was positive. Someone was deliberately lurking just at the edge of my vision. This time I rushed ahead right on his heels. But again, no one stood on the other side. My hands shook as I tried dialing for the store manager. But there was no cell service this deep in the windowless store. I'd have to get to the security office near the entrance to radio for help. I decided to sprint there as fast as I could, but the overhead lights abruptly cut out the instant I took my first panicked steps. Pitch darkness engulfed me as I lost my footing and crashed painfully onto the hard floor. A split second later, the backup lights activated with a loud buzz, bathing everything in a dim fluorescent glow. As my eyes adjusted, I realized I was now surrounded by 6 towering figures staring down at me. I cried out in shock before realizing it was just the mute plastic models that were moved out onto the floor each morning. In my blind panic, I had gotten completely turned around in the clothing aisles. As I tried to slow my frenzied breathing, I heard a scraping sound from one aisle over. No more chasing phantoms. I was getting the hell out of here. I took off sprinting as fast as my shaky legs could carry me. Each step filled me with searing pain, but pure adrenaline kept me crashing forward like a wild animal. I was almost to the glowing red exit sign when a tall silhouette darted out from a perpendicular aisle just 10 feet in front of me. We both collided violently to the floor, my head cracked against the hard linoleum. As I tried to push myself up, I realized the dark figure was now standing over me. I tried to scream but could only manage a hoarse whimper. As my blurry vision adjusted, I saw the figure reach into his pocket and produce a small object. To my shock, I realized it was a store employee badge dangling from his clenched fist. The photo showed a clean-shaven man in his 30s wearing an eager smile. Tyler was his name. "Don't be scared, man, it's just me, Tyler," he said with an odd, excited laugh. "I didn't mean to freak you out, was just having a little fun." My shock and relief instantly turned to anger. This idiot was a fellow Night Stalker playing some kind of twisted joke on me. "What the hell, Tyler?" I spat back. "I could have had a damn heart attack. Why didn't you answer me earlier?" His grin vanished, replaced by a cold, hard expression. "Sorry, dude. Guess I just got carried away," he muttered. "Didn't think you'd actually get so scared over nothing." As he talked, I noticed a thick chain dangling from his pocket that connected to a set of store keys. My blood turned to ice water. "Wait a minute. What are you doing with the manager's keys?" I asked shakily. You're not even scheduled tonight." His eyes narrowed as he turned the keys over in his hands. "Oh yeah. Jim had to leave early and asked me to lock up for him," he finally replied. Too quickly. I knew he was lying. Jim would never leave his keys with some other employee like this. Something was very, very wrong. Tyler must have sensed my unease as he shifted on his feet. I needed to get out of here. Now. Adrenaline surged back through my veins. I had to get to my car. "Well, hey, it was just a prank gone wrong, no big deal," I said with forced casualness. "I gotta get home, though. Have a good night, man." I tried to walk calmly past him toward the exit. As soon as I went to push on the metal door, I felt Tyler's powerful grip on my shoulder wrenching me violently back into the store. Whoa, what's the big rush all of a sudden?" Tyler said with a strange smile. I avoided his piercing gaze, noticing a trickle of sweat running down his forehead. "Sorry, just really tired after a long shift," I mumbled, slowly backing away. "I'll talk to Jim about this later." "Jim had to leave early, remember?" Tyler said, that unsettling grin returning. "Looks like it's just you and me to close up tonight." He began slowly walking toward me as I retreated down the aisle. I needed to get to the security office. It was my only chance now. I bolted down the store's central walkway, weaving through stands of merchandise. As I heard Tyler's heavy footsteps pounding after me, I swept anything I could grab off the shelves behind me to slow his pursuit. I could see the office just ahead, just past the men's changing rooms. I was so close. Suddenly, Tyler's body slammed into me from behind with savage force, driving the wind out of me as we tumbled brutally to the ground. Dazed, I still managed to crawl toward the office door, but Tyler's vice-like grip closed ruthlessly around my ankle, jerking me away from safety once again. "You're not going anywhere," he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. His eyes were now wide and wild. "We're going to have some fun tonight, just the two of us." His fingers clawed at my neck as I struggled to break free. With my last bit of strength, I kicked violently back at his knee until I felt a crunch. Tyler howled in pain, releasing his hold just long enough for me to scramble away. I pulled myself into the office and slammed my body against the door until it sealed shut. My lungs heaved for air as I heard Tyler's fists furiously pounding on the other side. I knew I only had moments before he broke it down. I grabbed the emergency radio and screamed into it for help. "Please let someone still be at the security office," I prayed. Suddenly, a terrifying thought filled me with dread. What if Tyler had hurt Jim earlier and taken his keys? What if there was no one coming to save me? I heard the bone-chilling squeal of metal as Tyler wedged something into the door and began prying it open. In a panic, I overturned the manager's heavy wooden desk and shoved it in front of the entrance, reinforcing the barricade. The desk violently lurched forward with each of Tyler's savage blows against the door. But it managed to hold, at least for now. I knew I had to leave this room before Tyler forced his way in. The air vents. I remember they connected various rooms together behind the scenes. It was my only way out. I climbed atop the desk and pried off the vent cover. The opening was barely big enough to fit my shoulders through. Pulling myself into the dusty air shaft, I heard Tyler's enraged screams from the office below. The desk barricade exploded into pieces as he finally burst into the room. On my hands and knees, I crept as fast as possible through the lightless vent, my knees burning against the rough metal. I took turns blindly at each intersection, praying I was heading toward an exit. Suddenly, I felt empty space beneath my hand plunge down into blackness, another vertical vent opening. I couldn't tell how far the drop was in this darkness. I heard Tyler's distant screams echo up from some nearby passage in pursuit. With no other choice, I braced myself and slipped into the void, sliding down the cold metal chute before landing roughly on a tile floor below. I found myself in the physical darkness of the store once again. The backup lights had all been shut off. I crawled desperately past shelves and racks, searching for any exit sign to guide me. I heard Tyler closing in from somewhere behind. My hands landed on a doorway along the back wall, an emergency exit. I crashed through it with all my remaining strength. Cool night air washed over me as I found myself in an outdoor gated area behind the store where the trucks made deliveries. I just had to scale this fence, and I could escape across the back lot to safety. I was pulling myself up the chain-link barrier when I felt Tyler's hands clench around my legs. trying to wrench me back down from freedom. I kicked wildly, screaming into the night until I felt my shoe connect with his jaw, forcing him to release me once again. My body crashed down on the other side onto the hard pavement. Ignoring the pain, I sprinted without looking back until I reached the glow of the streetlights ahead. I was finally out. I wanted to collapse right there from exhaustion, but I knew I had to keep running. I cut through the empty parking lot toward my car, dialing the police as I ran. Tyler was still somewhere behind me. I could feel it. I just prayed I could get to my car before he appeared again. The dispatcher's voice on the line urged me to stay where I was until help arrived, but I knew it was too late for that now. My fingers shook violently as I tried to unlock the driver's door. Finally, it popped open. As I jumped inside and slammed the door shut, I saw a dark figure sprinting toward me from the shadows of the store. Tyler. My tires squealed as I threw the car into reverse and sped backward out of the space before shifting gears and peeling out of the lot. I caught one last glimpse of Tyler's silhouette growing smaller in my rearview mirror before the night swallowed him up. I kept driving and didn't look back again. The next few hours were a blur of flashing police lights, emergency rooms, and endless questions from detectives. I recounted the night over and over until it didn't even seem real anymore. Exhausted and overwhelmed, the only thing I knew for sure was that I was lucky to have escaped at all. Tyler is yet to be found, and the security footage of him was too grainy for police to ID who he really was. The disturbing incident remains unresolved. Maybe he was just a deranged man who had developed a sick fascination with me. I'll never know for sure.